welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
the FAIRtax guys.
And we are coming to you live from Big Daddy Studios in Gainesville, Florida. And for those of you who might be not familiar with our schedule, we go on live every other Wednesday. We're on at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We're a little bit late today, but we're on at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time every Wednesday. Every other Wednesday it's live. Then every other Wednesday after that it's pre-recorded. But when the pre-recorded program streams live on Facebook, the comments are live, so we're still there. That's kind of half live. We're there talking to folks about something we recorded a week ago, and that's how that's going. And we're having some technical issues as well. We were going to talk to Kerry Bowers, who is out in Nevada, and we are attempting to connect with him as we speak. Now, isn't technology wonderful, the way things work like that?
Yeah, it's wonderful when it works. You know? But, for instance, we're not seeing our image up on the screen there, so we can see what we're doing.
Our regular video monitor is just not working, so we're getting there.
Anyways, Kerry will be with us soon.
There we go.
Oh, hi there. There we are. Hey, look, Bob, it's you and I.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, let's invite people to get a hold of us. TheFairtaxGuys@gmail.com is our email address. Of course, we're live streaming on the Facebook page, actually two of them. We've got the Facebook official page that we're on, and we're now streaming on our FAIRtax Guys Facebook page as well, as well as Excluded.tv. Again, Excluded.tv, a visual streaming platform that carries a lot of the content that the big social media networks are excluding from their platform because they don't want you to see it. So if you'd like to see what the big guys don't want you to see, isn't that cool? Isn't it always neat to see something you're not supposed to? But,
the anyhow, powers that be.
That's a very modest $30 a year subscription fee to subscribe to Excluded. That's XCLUDED.TV. And you can see the FAIRtax guys and see a lot of other good folks as well.
For Excluded, too, you can get, there's Excluded apps for the iOS and for Android. You can get them for the Apple TV. You can download the Excluded app for the Apple TV, Roku, the other digital TV platforms. So you can actually be watching this at home on your big screen TV, you know, if you subscribe to Excluded TV. So that's pretty cool. And I've watched it at home, and it is neat to see our show on a big screen TV.
I haven't figured out how to do that yet, so I'm working on that. But we'll invite people to give us a call. We are on live. It's 11:37 a.m. on Wednesday, October the 10th. And our phone number, if you'd like to call, and hopefully we can talk to Kerry Bowers and we can get him connected here with us. He's supposed to be Skyping in or something similar to it anyway. There's the number you see down at the bottom of the screen, 888-787-8023. That's 888-787-8023. Of course, if you want to just talk to us, we can talk to you as well. But, Ron, one thing I want to talk about while we're kind of waiting to get Kerry connected here is that we have heard, have gotten wind here in Florida that the Florida Democrat Party is going to be doing the same thing to Ron DeSantis, the Republican governor candidate, that his primary opponent did, and that is run a dishonest attack ad against him, you know, getting him for his support of the fair tax. And in order to do that, they had to paint the fair tax as just some kind of monstrosity. This is huge 23% federal sales tax that's going to drive the price of everything right through the roof. So far, we haven't seen that. We just kind of got wind of plans that they're going to do that. But if they do, we're going to add them to our FAIRtax Guys Rogues Gallery of Dishonest Political Advertising. So we're asking you out there watching us today that if you see any dishonest ads running against a fair tax supporter that is flagrantly demagoguing and misleading the fair tax, we want to know about it. We will feature it right here on FAIRtax Power Radio and take it apart limb by limb. That's kind of fun to do, ain't it?
Yeah, because the only way you can criticize the fair tax is to misrepresent it or leave a lot of stuff out, like don't talk about the prebate. And of course, without the prebate, it's just another sales tax.
They kindly forget to remember to tell you that this is not a new tax that's paid on top of all the taxes you're currently paying. That's the image that these ads try to project. But they do not tell you that the fair tax is a replacement for the federal income tax. And think about what happens, all of the goodies that come with the federal income tax, besides all the evasion we get. Remember that nasty little thing, if you look at your paycheck and you'll see this little line called federal withholding. That is the government taking their pound of flesh out of your money before you even get your hands on it, so they are declaring themselves to be the highest spending priority that you have. They want you to pay the government before you spend a dime on your family, and that's just philosophically wrong. That goes away with the fair tax, because the income tax, that you are, getting the withholding for, that goes away. As also is the federal payroll taxes that support Medicare and Social Security, they go away. Now, the funding for those programs does not go away. It just swaps from the payroll-based thing where you've got just people working a job, working for a paycheck, supporting the system, to everybody who spends money above the poverty level for their household size. Those people will now be supporting Social Security and Medicare, so it's going to put it on a much wider tax base, a much firmer financial footing. But all of that goes away. The federal withholding goes away. The payroll taxes go away. Hey, I do believe we've got Kerry with us, and so that's what's going to happen. That's what these ads don't tell you when they're when they're saying that the fair tax is going to be this huge tax that's going to devastate families and destroy the economy and all that kind of stuff. We know that's a bunch of garbage. So if you see any of that happening in your area, give us a call, okay? Or let us know about it. The FairtaxGuys@gmail.com, or leave us a link on our Facebook page. Good morning, Kerry. Sorry for all the trouble getting you aboard here this morning. How are you?
Good morning. I understand you can hear me well enough.
I can hear you quite well.
Yes, in fact, I'm going to have to...
You're good. Let's see if we can get the technician here to turn our cans down just a little bit so we can...
I'll just test that.
Okay. You're good to go. Again, we apologize for the problems of a couple of weeks ago. We had a scheduling problem and couldn't get to you. It's nice of you to be with us again this morning. Oh, that's much better, Gabe. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Now, let me introduce Kerry Bowers, all right?
Oh, please do.
He is a veteran of the Air Force. He was a combat pilot. He was a businessman. He was also a presidential candidate, and I'm going to have him expand on that. But he's also an expert on the fair tax. I mean, he understands the fair tax upside down and inside out and so forth, like everybody else. So we're going to talk with Kerry about the fair tax today. Kerry, I think it's fascinating. Tell us about your presidential bid.
Well, the presidential bid for me was something through my website. And I focused on, number one, is that each one of the issues had to have a number of objectives. In some cases, we had to have strategies to meet those objectives. And then I had goals that allowed us to identify in each case how far we have come in achieving an objective and how far we had yet to go. And so actually in September of 2013, I announced my candidacy and then became a federally registered candidate in April of 2014. The problem that you have with being what's I call an unpublicized candidate is that you don't get the national recognition.
Yeah.
And I was one of over 1,300 federally registered candidates. Over 300 of those, in fact, were Republican. Almost 300 of those were Democrat. The rest were non-party and other various party affiliations. Wow. Unfortunately, when we hear about fake news, that's exactly what we have in this country. The news determines who they will publicize and announce who are the candidates, and leaving all the others to fend for ourselves. So I've actually engaged the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, on this. We still have some suits pending that will actually try to improve the means by which the people are notified to the news media that we actually have more than 17 Republicans and only 5 Democrats.
What's interesting about Kerry's website, too, is he identified the problems that he thought need to be addressed, and then he didn't put, we got to work together to solve these problems. He specified how he was going to approach each problem. I mean, it was a real problem-solving website. It was great, Kerry.
Well, thank you very much. And that was our focus. One of the biggest problems you have, too, today is everybody has such busy lives that to be able to draw them in and take the time to actually read the material becomes very, very difficult to do. And one of the things I like to always say, too, is that the responsible government that we get really is based upon us first as an electorate being responsible. And if we're not taking the initiative to really go through the details of what the candidates are offering, then don't expect anything better out of your government than what you put into it.
Yeah. All right. Good. If you'd like to talk to Kerry, if you've got a question or a comment that like to avail yourself of his expertise, again, we invite you to call us. We are on live. It's 11:45 on October 10th. So if your clock and your calendar agree with that, you've got the live version as opposed to one of the archived versions you can watch later. 888-787-8023. 888-787-8023 if you'd like to talk to Mr. Bowers. Kerry, I want to ask you something real quick. I thought it was very interesting back when Paul Ryan was putting his better plan together. A lot of the justification for that, they were saying all these wonderful glowing things about what a consumption tax does. And then they decided, let's see if we can twist the income tax into a pretzel and make it do these things. Just how dumb is that?
Well, yeah, what you're referring to is the Better Way plan that was put out in June of 2016, and that was actually produced by the Republican Congress. And Speaker Ryan had put together 6 issues that dealt with poverty in the country, health care in the country, and of course one of those was taxation. And in this particular case for taxation, the House Ways and Means Committee and the chairman of that committee, Kevin Brady, was asked to put together a small task force to take a look at what would be the best tax solution for the nation going forward. And it's quite interesting in that looking at the opinion of the experts, and I had a number of quotes that I have put out there online that were taken right out of the document. The document itself is only about 30 pages long, so it's fairly short. And everything points to, in fact, one of the things I always like to talk about is corporate taxes. And they point out in there that economists say that one of the worst taxes you can possibly have is a corporate tax because of its impact in many different ways.
Yeah, people think if you tax the corporations, then the individuals don't have to pay as much, and that is just not true.
Yeah,
that's absolutely correct. As far as corporations go, that's going to be passed along. It's going to go to the consumer. It's going to go to the workers of those corporations who are not going to have increased opportunities for wage growth. It's going to mean a reduction in the number of jobs. It's going to mean, in the worst case, the possibility that business will fold and move overseas. And then also look at investors. As long as you have a corporate tax plus a personal income tax, and that works out to be a double tax upon an investor. So that it really impinges upon the interest in investing in corporations. So all in all, it's just not a good thing.
It isn't.
Yeah.
So how do we get the Congress critters to start making the fair tax part of the conversation when you're talking about debating tax reform?
That's a good question.
Well, that is a very
I'm not sure he's got an answer, but we'll see what we can get here.
Well, today we have, I think it's 47 co-sponsors, and then of course the sponsor that put the legislation in from the House of Representatives, which is where tax issues are actually going to start. And I think what we're going to find is that in each case they're all Republican. And I hate to say it, guys, but the fact is that Republicans are very timid about taking really big steps into new policies and new programs. We have a president that's fairly bold, but even our current president is really not pushing a whole lot of new agenda. He's in fact massaging a lot of old agenda.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Frankly, this is an ideal program for Democrats. Democrats seem to be able to get things done, whether it really applies to constitutional implications as far as being valid constitutionally and economically principled. I almost lost my battery power there for a second.
Okay.
But Democrats will, in fact, take action. And this is actually a perfect program for Democrats because one of the things that they really focus on is upward social mobility. And when you're talking about the fair tax, it is far greater than an income tax because with an income tax, if you've got, let's say, a single working mother out there that's trying to raise some kids, put some money away so that those children will have an opportunity for college one day, you're going to find under an income tax, the more she works, the more income she produces, the more tax she makes. And with increased taxation, then also comes the fact that you start losing benefits like subsidies for housing that they may get, subsidies for utilities, all these other things are starting to be impacted. Whereas under the fair tax, what we're talking about there, if that working mother or father goes and takes that second job or third job, and they don't have to spend that on the basic necessities of life in order to keep their household up and can just put it away, now that is untaxed. It has no tax consequence on it. Plus, when it goes into an investment program, that also will not be taxed. And then when it is pulled out for education for those children in the future, we don't have the tax component on tuition. So all in all, the fair tax really serves to a lot of the Democrat issues But, it's too bad in this country today that it doesn't matter what party says it, the other party automatically is going to disagree with it.
And
that's where the real battle is, I think.
Yeah.
We've got a timid group that supports it and a group that could really get it moving that doesn't want to support it, and I believe they do so for political reasons. And that's unfortunate because that really imparts upon each and every American.
Okay, Kerry, we're getting some comments here on our Facebook page here. There's a lady named Sandy Goodell who's asking a question she'd like you to address. Interesting that we should mention imported goods. How will the fair tax affect the cost of those goods, imported goods coming into the country? Will they not be affected until the consumer level?
Actually, the imported goods is the bill talks specifically about that, both S-18 and H.R. 25. Depending upon what type of treaty arrangements we have with the country from which those are coming from, and I'm talking about commercial goods, not the personal stuff you bring back with you right now. But the commercial goods that come in, they will be taxed with their duties and other tariffs that may be appropriate, and then those items will go to the register where they will also have then the fair tax applied to those. Now, one of the things they also talk about in the legislation is the potential of possibly, depending upon what the product is, potentially having that taxed also with the sales tax at the border. One way or the other, it will have the tax applied to it. Right. Most likely you're going to see it at the register after it has gone through the duty and the impost and whatever other tariffs may be applied to it. The second part of that question, just to make sure I understand, is when we go overseas and we want to buy something and bring it back home. Well, just like today, there's a limit on the amount that you can bring back for personal consumption before customs will put a tax on it. I went through this as a military member coming back from overseas and then going through the process of getting some of that money back that I ended up paying as a customs duty on that. So under the fair tax, you'll still have a $400 limit, and you'll have to declare that when you come into the country. Anything over that $400 limit, then you're going to have the sales tax applied to it.
Yeah, so you don't escape the fair tax by bringing it in from overseas. And
absolutely, you do not.
Yeah, and then the other side of that is that under the fair tax, with the drop in not consumption tax, but
the VAT tax you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about compliance costs. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was having a senior moment there. Compliance costs for our companies go way down under the fair tax because you don't have all that nonsense with the income tax to deal with. Their costs go down. So when our companies ship things overseas, they don't have those compliance costs rolled in. Makes our companies much more competitive, correct?
That is in fact correct, because we're going to remove the income tax, the payroll tax that we are paying essentially to the employee, plus the employer's share of that is eliminated. Then we also have the fact that corporate taxes are eliminated, and then we will be shipping our products overseas without all those embedded taxes that we have in there today. So it makes us that much more competitive in the overseas markets.
All right, Sandy says, very good answer. You've answered her question, and to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Very nice. Very nice.
All right. But again, how do we get the income tax to do what a consumption tax does? I think the answer is you don't. You just get rid of the income tax and replace it with a consumption tax. Why won't they do that?
Well, I think the big reason there has to do with how the income tax can be manipulated. And one of the big things is the temporary tax measures that Congress likes to impose. We talk a lot about Congress and the relationship that they have with lobbyists. And a lot of times we'll hear the blame placed on corporations and their lobbyists for creating the tax structure that we have and really what the consumer and the people bear as cost in the long run. But the real problem is it's not with the corporations and it's not with the lobbyists. It's with the Congress that creates the mechanism and continues to perpetuate that mechanism in order to continue this cronyism that we have. Yeah. Peter Schweitzer, who has written some very good books and does it from an apolitical position, one of those that he wrote is called Throw Them All Out. And he makes a very good point of how when you have these corporate meetings or parties and you have these lobbyist parties, how you'll have various congressional staff, not just the congressmen, but staff go there, and they kind of wave in their face saying, hey, we got this tax measure coming up for some impact to your product. What can you do to help me out so that I can help you out?
Yeah.
And they literally will put out these big bowls on tables or on top of the piano, wherever the case may be, so that they can take and drop checks in that. And Peter Schweitzer does a really good job with his staff of following where the money goes. And it's very interesting to see when specific tax issues are coming up, just how much money is coming from which type of company in order to essentially pay for the advantage that temporary tax measure represents to them. So we can talk about corporations and lobbyists all we want, but the real root of the problem is Congress that allows a mechanism for that to exist.
Got another question for you here from Michael Alcoin. It says, if you didn't pay into Social Security, will you be eligible for benefits under the fair tax? Sounds like there's a little misunderstanding about how that works.
If you did not pay into Social Security, no, you will not. Under Social Security, essentially, you gain 4 credits a year. You have to work 10 years in order to get your full 40 credits under Social Security. Under the fair tax, the way that will work is that your employer, although they will not be sending in any money, either the employee or the employer share the payroll tax, they still will be reporting your earnings. And for those that have jobs where they receive tips, you can also declare those and report up to $5,000 a year that will be applied against your future Social Security benefits. Mm-hmm. So bottom line is that you still have to have an earned income where you have an employer, or if you're self-employed and you're reporting your income, that's the only way that you'll be able to derive those benefits, or your spouse or survivors in the future.
Yeah, you're talking about Social Security benefits there. I think this guy might be thinking about maybe the prebate, the benefit under the fair tax. You get the prebate. That has nothing to do with how much you've paid in. That's just your household size.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's determined by the qualifying numbers within a qualified family, as they call it. And that will come to you every month. And that is, in fact, paid by the Social Security Administration as directed in the bill. And that will come to you in one of 2 forms, either on a STAR card, which is a little smart card, which will be loaded every month. And then you can use it kind of like a debit card, if you will. Or it will be by a direct electronic transfer to your bank account.
All right.
Yeah. All right. That's good. Yeah, the prebate, the one thing about the prebate that people need to understand, it's not an entitlement. It is a reimbursement for the fair taxes you'll be paying on the basic necessities of life. Because we believe that under the fair tax, nobody should have to pay taxes on what it costs to stay alive. It's just that simple. All right? And Social Security is a totally different issue. The benefit under the fair tax, as I understand it, and you can elaborate on this, is that the funding for the Social Security is going to be much more stable under the fair tax than it is now. Can you elaborate
Well,
on
that's
that?
exactly right. When you take a look at an income tax, if we go through a big recession where a lot of people are laid off, then you don't have income coming in, which means a reduction in revenues, and that not only to the general fund, but of course to Social Security as well as to hospital insurance, which is the Medicare. Under the fair tax, when you go to purely consumption tax, people are still going to be spending money, if you will, and sometimes that may even be coming just from the wealth that they've accumulated, which will continue to pay in and provide revenue. So you'll find that actually a consumption tax, because spending will tend to have a relatively stable. Of course, this can be impacted by loss of jobs too, and you'll have some decrease. But you won't see the deep spikes, if you will, those troughs between the crests and the troughs as we look at the economy when you compare a consumption-based tax with an income-based tax.
Yeah. And the other issue is that right now, under the current income tax, we have a tremendous evasion rate. 1 out of 5 people are not paying the income tax. I mean, that's that simple. You know?
Yeah, you have a very high evasion rate, and you got to look at it from the standpoint, too. Just look at the numbers. You got about 30 million businesses out there you're having to keep up with, and about 165 million plus people individually paying income taxes. So there's lots of opportunities in there to evade. And just in the numbers alone. And so if you get rid of that 165 million individual tax payers, and you just go down to your businesses alone, and you go from a single agency, which is the IRS trying to cover all 200 million of those roughly, down to 50 agencies, which is each one of the state administering authorities taking care of all the things within their state specific to those who are required to collect the taxes, well, you reduce your opportunities then to have that evasion, plus you increase by 50-fold you increase your enforcement of your tax laws because you have the people to do it down at that state level.
And I make the case that the states have been collecting, 45 of the 50 states have been collecting a sales tax for a long time. They know how to do it. They know what fraud looks like. And they know how to take care of these people. Now, I did have somebody online from the leaders group say, well, it won't be the states that go after the federal fraud. If somebody is not paying the fair tax, the states won't go after them, the federal government. Okay, well, that's a technicality. The states will discover it, and they'll turn it over to a federal agency and say, this company is, or this supposed company is not paying the fair tax in there. Right? But anyways, they're going to be found out, and they're not going to enjoy the results.
Given that the retailers get a small kickback of what they collect, I mean, it incentivizes them to collect it, not evade it.
Right.
No, that's exactly right. It does not only that from the retailer's point of view, but there's other credits that they can put in there too that will help them to keep their prices down. And criminals are going to be criminals. Bottom line, they're going to try to find some way to evade. But one of the things we found, and I think that there was one evaluation that was done in Minnesota some years ago, as I recall, and talked with Dr. Walby on this, who was our chief economist for FAIRtax, and they found that the evasion rate for the consumption-based tax was considered to be a lot lower than what we had seen there for income-based taxes. So it's a lot more difficult to evade. There's incentive not to evade under the fair tax. And I just think all the way around we're going to find it to be a lot more efficient, a lot more effective in collecting our taxes, and we'll see a lot more of those taxes coming in that are now escaping the system.
That's right, and a lot less evasion, as you said.
Got a quick question here from Brent Coffin. Since only new goods are taxed under the fair tax, do you all know off the top of your head what percentage of consumer goods purchased in today's market are new? I'm not sure I know that figure. Any idea? Or are we throwing you a curveball as well?
I haven't seen that question before.
I haven't actually seen that in terms of what's new versus used and that kind of percentage. But I will say this is that whenever we come up with the rate that is established, we look at what's called personal consumption and then also, personal consumption expenditures and government consumption expenditures. And it is from those figures that are provided through the Department of Commerce and the Bureau of Labor and Statistics that we're able to arrive at a conclusion, if you will, of just what rate we need to set based upon what the consumer, both private and government, is consuming today in order to determine a tax rate.
Well, I'll tell you what, time flies when you're having fun. We're just about wrapping up on this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. We're going to hold Mr. Bowers over. The pre-recorded show that will show next week at this time. We'll be talking to him about some of the other stuff that we got here. So hang with us here for just a second while we wrap this show up, and then we'll start working on the other one. If you do, again, appreciate you being with us this morning, Kerry.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Quick hit on the promotional closet now. You like to do that. You've got some of your goodies over there.
Oh, yeah. There is. We often talk about, there's all kinds of promotional items there. There's pens, there's pins, and these pins are effective for attracting attention. There's this little item which is fairly new. It's a strobe light. It can be a flashlight. It's got magnets on it, all right, and it's got fair tax, real tax reform. All right. So there's all kinds of things. There's hats, there's shirts, there's jackets, there's travel mugs, there's umbrellas. There are all kinds of things in the FAIRtax logo store. FAIRtaxlogostore.org. FAIRtaxlogostore.org. You can demonstrate your support for the fair tax. You can wear it. You can use these items. You can leave the pens at a restaurant. When you go to a restaurant and sign the check, leave the pens. They got information about the fair tax on them. There are information cards, which are very handy. If you have somebody that's interested enough and said, I'd like to learn more about the FAIRtax, buy 100 of these things and keep them on hand. My wife always has these in her purse and so forth. And then the smaller cards are prebate cards. They got some basic information about the FAIRtax on one side, and they got the prebate schedule on the other side. People love these things. And there's lots of items. You'd be surprised at how many items there. So show your support for the FAIRtax, FAIRtaxLogoStore.org.
All right. Well, appreciate everybody watching FAIRtax Power Radio here on Facebook and on Excluded TV. We will be continuing our conversation with Kerry Bowers this time next week. But until then, we are the FAIRtax guys. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Providing you that the FAIRtax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
These income tax forms are way too complicated. There's got to be a better way. Who are you?
we're the FAIRtax guys.
We've got a big solution for you.
What's that?
It's the FAIRtax. Completely eliminates the federal income tax system as we know it. No more withholding, no more payroll taxes, no more tax returns ever, no more IRS. All gone. And I guarantee you, once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Yeah.